what we're going to talk about today is tools. And the reason why we're going to talk about tools are, other than your people, this is the biggest single investment you're going to make. You have to determine, based off the way you want to run your shop, on what your expectations are, what tools techs are going to bring with them, and what you're going to provide. And don't underestimate what gets counted in as a tool. What do I mean by that? Lifts, they're a tool. A grinder, a welder, these are all tools. These are major tools, okay? Even something like a jack and jack stands. Those are things that you're going to be buying as part of the shop. What about a parts cleaner? Something like they call it a CUDA. For those of you that have never seen it, it's basically like a dishwasher on steroids. You can put dirty, greasy parts. They make all different sizes, but the biggest ones will do heads, a block. And you put them through, and it will steam clean, basically, to get all the grease, dirt, and oil off. Now, you look at it, a lift is easily $10,000 by the time you do install and everything else. Something like the CUDA, like I was just talking about, $8,000-$9,000. A good jack, couple hundred. A couple of sets of jack stands, you're looking at another couple hundred. Now, if you're in a dealership, you have to add to that, or let's say you want to be an authorized service center for a particular brand. Like you'll see that especially with imports like BMW, there are some independent repair places that are, authorized to do BMW warranty work. Okay. These places are going to have to buy tools that the manufacturer tells them is the tool you must have on hand to do certain work. Let me give you an example. When I worked for Ford, they were just coming out with diesel exhaust fluid. And the tanks where the diesel exhaust fluid was kept, people would try to cheat and not put diesel exhaust fluid in, but put water in it. The computer knew that it was water, but even worse than it being water, or worse than it, than just lying in a computer, diesel exhaust fluid didn't freeze in sub-zero temperatures. Water does. And so now the tank that would keep the diesel exhaust fluid would actually crack and break. So you had to remove the tank and the pump unit from it, because you had to verify that it really was water, and there were some other tests. Were there standard hand tools that would work to remove this? Yes. Were they what Ford said you were supposed to use? No. Ford had a special, what they call a spanner wrench, very large opening. You were supposed to put on the lock nut for it to remove it to get the pump module out. If I opened up my own repair shop, I can buy that, I could not buy it. That's up to me. But if I'm going to run a dealership, I have to buy that tool. Otherwise, Ford's going to tell me I can't be a dealership. That's part of what goes into it. That's part of that franchise agreement. To give you an idea how crazy this is, Chrysler stopped putting transmission dipsticks in a lot of their automatic transmissions starting in the early 2000s. Those dipsticks were considered a specialty tool. The dealership had to go out and buy Miller tool number J19, whatever, because that was the specialty tool. So you have to decide. Now, The advantage, if you're going to specialize, we specialize in Chryslers or we specialize in BMW. The advantage of being a specialty shop is if you have enough clientele near you that buy those vehicles, then you have a very good chance of being able to get in and get things done. And if you buy the specialty tools, you can move your times up really quick. Your techs are not generally going to buy all those specialty tools. You will. But the downside of that is those specialty tools may not help you on anything but those vehicles. So if you go out and buy a ton of Chrysler specialty tools, but you only see one Chrysler a day, how much money are you putting out on tools and how much money are they making you? It's a balancing act. Other tool items to consider. Okay, some tools require a cost that goes beyond just buying it. What do I mean? Your scan tool. If you're running a shop, you're probably going to have at least one, maybe even up to 3 major, heavy-duty, expensive scan tools. Those tools are going to be the go-to tools for your drivability techs. They're going to pull codes, but they're going to let them see live data. They're going to let them go, compare that live data, maybe even get the service info on the tool, maybe even record some of the data that they're having. These are not cheap tools. They could be $3,000 to $10,000 depending on how many bells and whistles they have. But that's not the only cost. The big cost is the fact that every year you're going to put out another $600 to $800, maybe even $1,000. Snap-on runs about $1,000. Matco's about $600. You're going to run every year having to subscribe and update this tool, because as the cars get updated every year, there are codes in the car that are not universal. They're manufacturer-specific codes, like codes for the body control module that handles the windows and the alarm system and the things like that. The radio might be its own module. These are not things covered under your normal code reader that you can buy from AutoZone. But there's no rule that code has to be the same across all manufacturers. I'll even do you better. I know for Chrysler and Ford, the same code doesn't even mean the same thing from one model to another or from one year to another. So what you're paying for is for this tool to stay updated so that it could tell you what the information you're pulling in means. But that's a cost. You put a lift in. That lift needs to be inspected every year. Okay? So, and a lift inspection might be, $2,000 to do your shop and any adjustments and preventive maintenance work that needs to be done. Parts washers, the fluid in them, you can't just put down the drain. A company like Safety Clean is going to come out, remove that fluid, and put fresh in. That might run $800-900 once every 3 months, so 4 times a year. So you almost have to have a budget set aside for maintenance and then replacement. And what do I mean by replacement? Well, every piece of equipment you buy is going to what they call depreciate, meaning the lift that you bought for $6,000 today and you had installed for another $2,000 to $4,000. Don't worry about the $2,000 to $4,000 for the install, but just the lift itself. It costs $6,000 today. As you use it, it's going to be worth less and less and less and less. So a year from now, it may only be worth $4,000. Another year later, it's worth maybe $1,500. So that 3 years in, that lift has no value if I were to take it down and try to sell it. It's done. It's gone. So you have to be aware of that going in, that every piece of equipment you buy is going to depreciate. Now, the one thing you've spent money on that's going to what we call appreciate, or at least you hope it will, is the building. If you bought the building, now if you're renting it, this doesn't apply, but if you buy a building, as you improve it, maybe you put a new roof on, put a new floor on, you make the bays nicer, you put new lights in, you put air conditioning in, any improvement you do is going to increase the value of the building. And hopefully you get a good business going. You have really good business records. The business itself is going to appreciate in value, meaning it's going to be worth more than the money you put into it. But tools don't work that way, especially shop tools. Now, your hand tools, technically from a financial standpoint, they're going to depreciate, but as long as they're making you money, they're valuable. So you're going to have to always weigh that out. So why does all this matter? Why is this something to keep in mind? Because part of what you're going to be protecting is the tools and the consumable supplies. Things like refrigerant, oil, grease, transmission fluid. You're going to pay money for all those. Now you're going to buy them at a cost. And there's going to be a suggested markup, a suggested number you ought to be charging the customer that's higher, obviously, than what you paid. Because if you charge the customer the same as what you paid, you still lost money. Okay? So, and the reason why you lost money and you didn't just break even is because while you were waiting for that part to come in, a car took up a bay you could have got another job in. Or let's say it was a consumable. It had to take up room on your shelf instead of something you needed today. So there's always a cost associated with it. And if you only charge the customer what it costs you, you're actually going to lose money. The goal is to make money, obviously, on everything we sell. Now, it doesn't mean you gouge the customer. It doesn't mean you up it 100%. But you're going to up the cost to the customer. And part of what you're going to determine is what is a viable cost. Whenever a customer is getting charged for work, the cost of the tools should be part of the cost they're paying. You know, part of the reason why customers come to me are because I know how to fix it. I also have the tools to fix it. So everything you're going to go out and purchase or lease even to make your shop work is something that you ought to be, yes, you pay for up front, but you should be recovering some of that cost for every job you put it to. Now, some things you will be able to go out there and you know, you could get the cheapest thing and kind of make your decision to make it work. There are also going to be other things that state laws determine. How you handle waste oil. When you go to anything that's considered a hazmat, like antifreeze, waste oil, grease, parts washer fluid, these are things that the government watches. You, for every gallon you take in, you got to be able to show where is it going. Now, if you have a waste oil heater, that's great. It's still going to show how many gallons you put in and how many it burned. So you have to be able to account for every gallon of hazardous fluid you take in. And it's your problem until it's either disposed of, like a waste oil heater, or a company comes to dispose of it for you, like Safety-Kleen. They'll give you a bill. To give you an idea, 400-gallon tank of waste oil is about $600 every 3 months. Parts washers, because they could have anything in them. There's nothing there to recycle. See, these businesses that take your waste, oils, great. That's the cheap one. They love taking that because they can recycle it and make it into new things. But if it's something like antifreeze or parts washer fluid, they can't do anything with that. That can cost up to $1,200 per 3 months. That's all called the cost of doing business. You want another big one now? Refrigerant. You have to have 2 machines anymore. You're going to need one for R134A and one for 1234YF, the new refrigerant out there. You're not allowed to let them mix. And if you don't have the 2 machines and an identifier, theoretically you can be fined by the EPA. And that's a much stiffer fine now than it used to be. So this brings up another item to keep in mind. And I said in my last video that we're going to start looking at kind of paperwork and records. One of the biggest records for any shop out there is going to be how you're handling your hazardous waste. Do you have the right tools to do the work that would require, handling hazardous waste, and how are you maintaining those tools and maintaining your workers' safety? That is a huge deal, and that is a huge part of the paperwork for you as an owner. So keep that in mind. I hope this has shed a little bit of light into the tools and the idea of tools depreciating in value, and so that you have a better idea of some of the costs that go into running the shop daily.